Hello and welcome to It's All Kicking Off, another football roundtable discussion podcast with myself, Adam Wilbourn, Ewan Patterson, and Adam Clery from What Culture Football, here to discuss another burning football issue. But before we get into it, if you're a fan of this sort of thing, make sure you subscribe to What Culture Football on either iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast from for daily football podcasts. But as I said, I'm joined by Ewan and Adam. England are in qualifying action this weekend at Euro 2020. But Adam Clery, how good are England really?
They're good. They're a better side than they were a couple of years ago. They're not quite as good a side as the World Cup made them look. I mean, don't be wrong, not to crap all over the achievements of getting to a semi-final. Bad teams don't get to a World Cup semi-final. However, there was two halves of that World Cup, which was side A, which was the World Cup, and there was side B, which was like this weird shield tournament that like Croatia, England, Sweden and teams were competing for. I don't think any of the teams that were in that half of the draw would have got as far as they did had they been in the other side. But England are a way better team for not being as good a team. Because historically, when England have got good teams, they're just full of really limited footballers who get massively over-egged for their achievements at club level and can't quite translate at national level. Whereas now they do appear to have a more cohesive side, smarter footballers. They play a more modern game than they historically have. They're good, but they haven't really beaten anyone yet.
Yeah, I was going to say that as much as we had all the excitement and buzz around England last summer, do you think sort of Nations League, as a random a tournament as that was, that sort of tempered expectations?
First of all, the Nations League should not exist.
Oh, the Nations League's brilliant. I'm
bad.
It's good fun.
Oh, bad. Anyway, one thing I will say about England is that they are playing with an identity now.
Yes, which is you can't say that
which
easily.
is, that's the thing that Gareth Southgate has to be applauded for. Really, he's gone into that side and basically crafted it into an actual England side. You look at the past national teams, like you said, they're just a lot of individual talents, but never a cohesive one. Whereas I look at that England squad and I see, there's genuine unity there, there's genuine talent and potential as well. I guess the big question mark hanging over them right now is that, even though there was that Southgate's been in the role for the past few years, and obviously he had an entire World Cup tournament. There are certain elements of that squad that are going to be changed as we're going forward. I think it's highly doubtful that even though Jesse Lingard's achievements at international level are modest, I highly doubt he's going to be around.
He's had a poor season, certainly. He's another one of these players. I always used to look at Tom Cleverley was a great example of this. Players can go into their national sides and play a very important role, which they look completely incapable of doing at club level, and indeed are incapable of doing at club level. But it's very important to sort of separate how they play week in, week out versus the job they can do for a national side. Cleverley always thought was a great example of this. Thought he was great when he played for England, but never really did anything at club level.
Well, Andros Townsend as well.
Andros Townsend as well was great when he played for England. Very, very fits and starts at club level. I think Jesse Lingard's probably going to get a few more call-ups because he hasn't let England down, as I would say. He's never, ever underperformed in a white shirt as opposed to he has been dreadful for Man United probably the last 18 months, to be honest. He didn't really do much.
He sort of slipped under the radar for me.
Yeah.
The last goal he got was against Liverpool and the derby that before Mourinho.
The guy Millie rocked at the Emirates against Arsenal, which I think gets him call-ups for the rest of his career, in my opinion. But you say England have got an identity. The club level form shouldn't really affect that too much. If you are part of that identity and you're going to play that system and you can be relied upon to play that system, if you're out of sorts at club level, it shouldn't impact it too much. Although obviously, if you're not playing, if you're not getting picked.
Danny Welbeck's starting now, yeah.
Welbeck was another good example of that. Again, he never disappointed when he played for England, but just I think probably now with his age and how far removed from regular football he is, probably too much to ask him to do all that.
Aside from infamously Euro 2008, England don't really struggle with qualifiers, and looking at the group that we've got, I think it's fair to say Czech Republic were one of the other threats in that group, and we beat them 5-0. We've obviously got Bulgaria and Kosovo coming in the next few days. If we, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but if we say that England make it to Euro 2020 even, do they have to be considered one of the favourites?
I think, they got to the semi-finals. They were 45 minutes away from going to the World Cup final. You know what I mean? So you do have to consider them a strong team in that regard. But if you look at the talent France have got, the sort of levels they're playing at, it would be another tournament of them playing well above themselves, which they are capable of doing, I might add, for them to get far in that tournament. You've got to remember the Euros are easier than the World Cup because there's no South American teams, there's no African teams, there's no Asian teams. It's just the best of the teams in Europe, and England are probably one of the better sides in Europe.
I looked at the FIFA rankings before we came in here.
They're relevant.
Belgium are, of course, ahead of France.
Yep.
Belgium, the England of modern football now.
Belgium are exactly the England of modern football. Loads of
on paper, that squad's the best in the world.
Oh, every tournament comes around, and you know them. You've got friends who do it. Somebody goes, "Do you know what? Belgium are my dark horses." And you go, "Why are they dark horses?" Oh, well, Belgium have never won anything. Yeah, but they've literally got the best squad at that tournament.
One of the best goalkeepers.
Why are they dark? Three of the best goalkeepers.
Yeah, three of the best goalkeepers.
Probably, maybe not so much now. Vertonghen's age has sort of caught up with them a bit. Company's not looking what it used to be. They're maybe a bit light at the back compared to how they used to be, but the front end of the pitch, they've got some of the best players in the world. It's just people consider them dark horses because they always underdeliver at tournaments because they do not have, as you say, a club identity.
In terms of looking at teams for Euro 2020, then obviously yes, France, Belgium. Germany and Spain are a big question mark. Of course, England fans cannot ever question VAR because it knocked Germany out of the World Cup. I'd be thinking quarterfinals, semi-finals of the Euros would be a bare minimum.
Yes, I think you're correct there. Like I said, and it comes back to the idea of the project. Southgate has been in and around the England side for a good few years now. Whereas you look at both, Spain in particular, look at that as being a massively hectic phase for them for the past few years.
Spain and Germany were all over the place at the last World Cup.
Yeah, I mean they've gone through several managers now. I think Valverde just left as well. So I've completely gotten. It was Ernesto Valverde, wasn't it? I'm getting completely confused.
We had Lopetegui who just got fired just before.
Yeah,
that was.
Hierro.
It was the Barca manager.
Really bizarre.
I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah. And yes, they're in a weird phase at the moment. Germany as well. So much talent in that squad. Germany, I think when we look, we hype up England's youngsters or whatever. Germany have the most exciting young talent. I think currently you have the likes of Kai Havertz. You have Sane in particular as well.
They didn't take Sane.
Julian Brandt as well. They have great players for that side, but I guess it's all about making it work. And I think England, even though they may not necessarily have as strong a squad as maybe Belgium or Spain or whatever, I think the fact that Southgate has been around probably indicates that people should be expecting things from them.
You mentioned key players for Germany and Spain. Who are England's?
Whichever centre-back establishes himself as the only good one over the next couple of years. John Stones seems to have fallen completely off the radar at Man City. There's talk that Fernandinho is going to come in the side for Laporte instead of Stones, which is almost inconceivable 12 months ago. Harry Mcguire, while he is extremely high banter and should have probably been on the £50 note, is not particularly a line-leading centre-back. I do think there is a stability issue. They could be incredibly exciting to watch. I think they've got about 5 or 6 players who could get into the 3 spots at the start, at the top end of the pitch, but I think they really, really do struggle at the back.
It's weird, because like the players that I want, not that I'm particularly motivated to care about England at all, but I think if on paper that squad, I think at the back you're looking at Ben Chilwell at left back, you're looking at Trent Alexander-Arnold at right back. I think that's probably how you'd want to be playing that system. I know people will probably disagree and say Kyle Walker or Kieran Trippier or whatever, but I think in terms of building the future of that team at the same time, I think both players have proved themselves to be good enough established in that position.
I would imagine, bringing the right back position, I would imagine they're probably going to go with Wan-Bissaka because the way Liverpool get the most out of Alexander-Arnold, he's probably one of the most creative players in that position. They really focus on the fullbacks, whereas we saw at the World Cup, that Kieran Trippier there was purely there for set pieces. The attacking spine of that side doesn't come from the fullbacks. The
intriguing thing we saw with this
it's interesting. We've got options there.
Yeah, absolutely. What we've seen with this England side, specifically with Gareth Southgate, is he doesn't wait till players have a drop off. He almost refreshes it.
Yeah,
it's a continuous refreshment. Obviously, Jadon Sancho. People are given opportunities, and I think it's what's been crying out for in England for a long, long time.
I think him and Maddison really exciting. Like Maddison, I think Maddison needs to, he's so creative. And I think you think of like England at the last World Cup. Who would you say was the most creative player?
Well, the whole problem England had at the last World Cup was the one player that really didn't do it on the pitch was Dele Alli. And the way they built the system, that position is incredibly important. Dele Alli, and we've said this pretty much every time we do a podcast when his name comes up, he is clearly still one of the most talented young players in the world. But for the last season and a half, he just, for whatever reason, hasn't quite found the level he was at when he first burst onto the scene. There's no reason he won't do that in the future. It would literally just take a few games to get him back at that kind of level, but he hasn't quite done it yet. And if you look at how creative Maddison is, it's glaringly simple decision to put him in that position and allow him to create.
Yeah.
We looked at the squad obviously when it was announced, and the headlines were Wan-Bissaka, Tyrone Mings, Maddison, Mount. Do you think, looking ahead to this Bulgaria and possibly even more so with the Kosovo game, that he will give the opportunity to those players? Because, the classic England thing is we pick all these players and people go, wow, this, surprising squad player has been selected for England, and they spend a week sat on a bench for England, and they go, well, that was nice, wasn't it? But whereas with Southgate, it seems like if you're getting picked, you're going to be playing.
It's tricky at international level because people always want to see people given an opportunity. So you got your Mason Mounts, your Tyrone Mings, whoever comes into the side. Yeah, throw them in. But you've got to remember, the difference between international and club football is there are so few actual games to bond a unified side. And it's almost worth the argument that if you know what your settled 11 is for an upcoming tournament, play them against Bulgaria and Kosovo, because that is 90 minutes they get together.
And even though we will have friendlies in between the qualifiers and the tournament, and even though you may have a friendly against a harder side, at the end of the day, it's still a friendly, whereas this is a competitive fixture.
You've got to remember, Ewan again mentioned this whole identity this England side have. This has been through the under-20 levels, the under-18 levels, all the youth levels, which saw England win all those tournaments a few years ago. A lot of these players, your Maddisons, your Mounts, etc., they've played this system. They've played this way of playing for England at youth level. So it shouldn't be too much a case of throw them in just to see how they are. You should be able to sort of trust them that, the methods are the same, the system is the same, the kind of players they're going to be playing with are the same. A lot of them will have been together at youth level as well. Like Jadon Sancho's gone all through the different youth levels in England. He's played with all of them. A lot of the, obviously not Wan-Bissaka because they dragged their heels over calling him up for so very long. Played up front, I think, for some other country. Yeah, there's some story about Wan-Bissaka, 15 or 16. Even though he was a fullback at club level, he was just the best player, so they were playing him up front. I think it was Burkina Faso, I want to say. They were playing him up front at one stage because he was just the best player. I don't think they shouldn't do too much experimentation. If you're going to commit to Maddison as being the starting player in that creative role, cool, throw him in. But if Mason Mount, for example, is going to be a fringe player probably on the bench, then you're better off starting him on the bench and bringing him on as and when he's needed, because that's the role you have in that side. I always think pitch time for your settled players is more important at national level than giving up opportunities out.
And Adam's mentioned the younger players there. In terms of talisman for England, you've obviously got Harry Kane. The question mark remains about Raheem Sterling for England. And I, for one, didn't really get the criticism for the most part that he received at the World Cup. It's a different team, it's a different setup, and he's still.
Can we just call that criticism out for what it was?
Yes.
It was pure race. It was it was purely racist.
And if you're even going to take a footballing critique to the any player being selfish at the front end of the pitch, Harry Kane squares that ball to Sterling.
Squares that ball in during the World Cup final,
it's completely, it is specifically racist. But yeah, it's interesting. I think the question is, do you tailor, we talk about England having an identity, do you tailor the formation to get the best out of a Sterling or or potentially a Maddison, or maybe even if you want to look at the way that Liverpool's fullbacks create, do you want to try and replicate that system at England as well? Those are really interesting questions, and you have to think about, well, how do I still want to keep the three at the back? Because I think even though that's an interesting way to play, I do think it can be limiting sometimes when you've got to, the onus is on you to break a team down.
I don't think they've got the players to play three at the back at the minute.
I think I would be interested in maybe seeing a traditional 4-3-3 or something that lets have a roaming midfield like Maddison to be the 10. You have the fullbacks creating at the same time. Sterling on the left, Kane down the middle, Sancho on the right. I think that is maybe where you see the best of this team.
I know I keep bringing up the fact you said thingy identity, but the problem you have with that, and Germany had this problem at the last World Cup, was they came up with this brilliant way of playing. And it won them X amount of tournaments, and then they've kept it so rigid to a point. This is how we play. We're Germans, how they play. Turned up at another tournament a few years down the line, the game's moved on, and they really struggled as a result.
Manuel Neuer.
You can't play Manuel Neuer on the right wing. The problem is England do have a strong identity at the minute, but as you say, if they stick too rigidly to that and they don't adapt and they don't get the most out of plays, Raheem Sterling is the best inside forward in the world right now. The way he's been finishing for Man City is so instinctive and so natural compared to that was where the question marks were of him a few years ago. Can't finish. You know what I mean? Good player, gets in good positions, but his finishing's a bit poor. You look at the goals he scores for Man City now, he's not even thinking, and he's putting these away.
Not to make this a fantasy football podcast, but I want to put Kevin De Bruyne in my team, but there's no room for him because I'm terrified of taking Sterling out.
The thing is, you say this, right? I remember a few years ago, specifically going into that World Cup, a lot of pundits were saying, why don't England just play how Spurs play? If they try and recreate Spurs' system, because they've got Danny Rose, they've got Kyle Walker, Kieran Trippier, Dele Alli, Harry Kane, you've got a real core of a side there that's going to get loads and loads out of those players, and then you just find the rest of the players that will adapt with it. As Ewan says, Liverpool have got a great system now, which Henderson is in, which Alexander-Arnold is in. You could get a lot out of those players. Man City, you could do it that way. You could get a lot out of Raheem Sterling. You've got to find out what is going to get the most out of the most amount of players.
I was going to say that there's a potential headache here as well for Southgate in the sense that players are constantly changing positions now. So obviously when we went into the when England went into the World Cup, Henderson was playing the holding role alongside, interchanging with Eric Dyer. Now Henderson has found himself being used as a more advanced midfield player, and the onus is on him to create.
Dyer's dropped off the radar entirely.
Do you bring in Rice at this point? There's interesting things. Henderson can do a job at the 6, but at the same time, you got to think about how this complements everyone.
One thing I wanted to ask was not to hark on about the World Cup, but I mean, it's the most obvious thing we can go from. Once Harry Kane, depending on your perspective, either got found out or got slightly injured and carried a bit of an injury throughout the tournament, it struck me that England didn't necessarily have that much of a plan B. Do we need more of that? An alternative of, like you say, switching to a pacier attack with with Sancho and Sterling? Or
it's international football. It's always very easy to say, oh, your side needs more goal threat, but you're literally limited by the players you've got and how they're playing at the time. Harry Kane remains still probably the best out-and-out centre forward in the world at the moment. Like, yes, he's had a bit of a rough time. Yes, when he stopped scoring at the World Cup, things didn't look particularly rosy, but he is the player at the top end of the pitch who you expect to deliver the most amount of goals. And the bottom line is, if there is a system that suits him above anybody else, that should be the one you try and accommodate. The way he plays at Spurs at the minute, there's a lot of talk of him dropping deeper and all this, but there's been a lot of stats doing the round after the first 4 weeks of the Premier League that he's still getting the most touches in the opposition box of any centre forward, or the second or third or something like that. So he's clearly still a threat at that end of the pitch. It's just, it goes back to this identity thing. Like, if Harry Kane is England's identity, then you might have to drop some very good players to accommodate that. But if he's not, then who do you put in that position?
I mean, you raised that point. There was an instance, I remember before the World Cup, I think it was the qualifiers, when Southgate experimented with having Drinkwater and Vardy playing, and then you have Drinkwater pumping long balls for Vardy to go in behind, and that wasn't particularly too successful. So it's always good to have an alternative plan. But usually, if your first plan is so good in the first place, which it should be, then you should have to resort to
just having this players that can come off the bench to continue.
Again, I would reiterate, the three at the back, while industrious at World Cup. I could think Clery made a very salient point there.
I don't think there's three good enough
England doesn't
centre-backs.
have three good centre backs to play that system anymore.
Not certainly not.
You got to remember, one of them was Kyle Walker, who was not in this squad for these upcoming games, because the strength at right back now, especially, is just. It's no slight on him. He's still a fantastic player and he'll have a fantastic season for Man City. But if you're constantly trying to build towards your future, and you've got Aaron Wan-Bissaka, you've got Trent Alexander-Arnold, Kieran Trippier exists in some capacity, then he is the fourth choice right back now.
Arguably the most important person for England out of everyone is Gareth Southgate. At the end of the day, we wouldn't be playing and doing the things that we do without his mentality and his confidence in his own ability. What does the future hold for Gareth Southgate?
I think it's his last tournament.
You think so?
Unless he wins it, I'd say it's his last tournament. Not because the sword of Damocles should be hanging over him, but because international managers tend not to last that long in the job anyway.
Where do you think he'll go?
Him? Oh, I don't know. Match of the day, probably. But
here we go. Solskjaer leaves Man United and they get Southgate in.
It's the banter era of the Premier League. I'd quite happily watch that. There was talk Newcastle were looking at Phil Neville. There was talk of after the Women's World Cup, so I don't see any reason why Southgate can't go to Man United.
What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. If he leaves, I think that would be a shame for England. I think, while it's always a good idea.
Ruins my Christmas jumper as well.
I think it's a good idea to, keep things fresh and stuff. He's done nothing to really justify.
The thing is, getting to the semi-final of a World Cup, effectively being the most successful England manager since Bobby Robson, it's a huge achievement. He deserves all the praise in the world for that, because for all people said it was a slightly easier run than a lot of sides got. I've seen England managers have easy runs and not do anything with it. Like Fabio Capello had an easy group at the World Cup. The Sun even said easy on the front page, and England scraped out of that. You still got to get those results, but if you look back and say, what was his, in terms of a match, what was his greatest, who did he really take the fight to? Who did he box with at a managerial level? There isn't really a big scalp for them. I know there was a couple of good results in the Nations League, but qualifying, there was no big teams, and England avoided all the big teams in the World Cup. The Colombia game was obviously a huge moment for the nation and a huge personal moment for him, but It was
Huge
Colombia.
moment for all three of us.
Yeah, England. God, we were mortal. England with a.
You were on the chairs, mate.
You'd left, hadn't you? You couldn't watch.
I could barely watch the penalty shootout. I came back in just in time, but it does things to me, penalty shootout. So.
I always love that. I turned to Ewan and I went, right before Eric Dyer took the penalty, Ewan, do you know, statistically in a penalty shootout, the most scored penalty is the one that decides the game. And you went, is that true? I went, no, I made it up. And then he buried himself. But yeah, like, Gareth Southgate needs to go to this tournament and he needs to beat a France, or he needs to beat a Spain, or he needs to beat a Germany at a major tournament. And that really establishes this identity England have and how far they've come and how they can win these big games all of a
That's
sudden.
a really, really important thing to bear in mind, is that this England side hasn't really been tested. You know, you look at like
when it has been,
and when it has been, you know, there is a fragility there. So I think you're totally right. You need to have a regularity in the sense that you're coming up against top opposition, and you know, this group doesn't necessarily give us any indication of where England are at. It's only when you actually get and start messing with the big boys, as it were, that you're going to see anything. And you know, it's a really international, like, football is just a very, very unpredictable, chaotic thing.
Yeah,
it's such an unknown
the beauty
quantity.
Of it. It's the beauty of it.
Yeah. So yeah, if Southgate doesn't deliver at Euros, then logically, yes, you would say that's that.
I just want to clarify. I wouldn't say move him on because he's failed.
No.
Move him on because you want to keep these things fresh. You want to, the game is going to move on, and you need to bring.
And you don't want to see what happens with Germany as well when they've kept him low for so long.
Yeah.
So,
there is virtually no history at national level of top sides hanging on to a manager for a long time and bringing them any success.
Just don't replace.
Other than Jurgen Low. But
Yeah.
again, look how that ended.
And he eats his own bogey. So, plus don't replace him with AD Boothroyd either. Couple of quick final questions. Fairly straightforward, not to be too arrogant, but 2 wins against Bulgaria and Kosovo.
It's the bare minimum expectation.
yes,
yeah.
if England don't do that, then what are they?
Question:
doing?
If England don't take 2 wins from that, they're obviously not understandably huge questions will be asked of that. Obviously.
And final question, you know what's coming. Is it coming home?
No.
Where is home?
I'm saying yes. The eternal optimist. Let us know your thoughts on England's prospects at Euro 2020 in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And you can tweet them to us at WhatCultureFC as well. Watch there, you can follow all 3 of us. You can follow Ewan at
Ewan ruins things.
You can follow Adam at
Adam Clery, Clery. You
can follow me at Adam Wilbourn. As I said, follow us all at WhatCultureFC. And make sure you subscribe to What Culture Football for daily football podcasts. This has been It's All Kicking Off. My thanks to Ewan and to Adam. Thank you for watching, and we will see you soon.
Bye.
Not saying.